The day I was trapped in the fire, my husband was waiting outside the delivery room for his first love. I died in that inferno, nothing left but ashes. When I woke up again, I was back in high school. Looking at that familiar face, all I felt was nausea. Ethan would never know that he lost more than just me in that fire. He also lost his unborn child. It was Ethan's turn to clean the blackboard today, but the name written there was clearly mine. Mia Sanders. Everyone was used to me covering for Ethan. After all, I used to be a total doormat for him. Showtime, Mia. Chad tossed the eraser at my desk, gesturing for me to wipe the board for Ethan. I stared at the eraser, scoffed, and walked towards the blackboard. The girls, who always looked down on my fawning over Ethan, started their usual snide remarks. Seriously, so shameless. She's been doing this for ages, and he barely even looks at her. I know, right? I heard. She's been chasing after him since middle school. I'd never stooped so low. It's pathetic, right? The whispers were never ending, but the Mia of the past had chosen to ignore them, blinded by a one-sided love that ultimately led to my lonely death in the fire. Even reborn, I wouldn't forget the searing pain of that night. They say you have to hit rock bottom to turn things around. Well, I hit rock bottom. Time to turn around. Everyone probably expected me to do what I always did. Erase the board for Ethan. Fetch him hot water, basically wait on him hand and foot. It was precisely because I was so used to giving that. Ethan, 10 years later, mistook himself for a king, but not today. I looked at the girls who were mocking me with feigned gratitude. Thanks for the heads up, ladies. Freak. Ignoring their taunts, I erased my name from the blackboard and wrote Ethan's in bold letters. No need to change the name anymore. Class. President, sorry to bother you all this time. The class stared at me, dumbfounded, as if I'd done something truly shocking. Is she crazy? What's her deal now? You guys don't get it. It's a reverse psychology. She's playing hard to get, waiting for him to come crawling back. Whatever. I shrugged and looked at the math equations covering the board. As I put down the eraser, I saw Ethan walking back from the basketball court. He was undeniably good-looking, standing there at the doorway, backlit. It was easy to understand why I'd fallen for him, but now looking at his face, I only felt disgust. The chattering girls suddenly fell silent. The entire classroom held its breath. Dozens of eyes were waiting for the show. I brushed the chalk dust off my hands, walked calmly to my seat, pulled out my chair, and sat down. I didn't glance at Ethan once. He had noticed the blackboard, probably assuming I'd already taken care of it. He went straight to his seat, reaching for his water bottle. Unfortunately for him, I hadn't filled it today either. His best friend Zach noticed the blackboard and whispered, "Dude, what's up with Mia? Benson writing her name up there? Mia didn't wipe the board for you. And no water." Ethan finally noticed the math equation scrolled across the blackboard. His brow furrowed, but he quickly regained his usual nonchalant expression and reached into his desk drawer. Normally, there would be a clean handkerchief and a carton of warm milk waiting for him, but today there was nothing. Zach watched as Ethan came up, empty-handed, and with his usual lack of tact said to me, "Mia, what's with this sudden change of heart? Not wiping the board, no milk, no water? What gives?" I frowned at Zach, impatience creeping into my voice. Is he disabled? Can't he do these things himself? I'm not his mother. I have no obligation to take care of him. Ethan's eyes flickered and he let out a soft, cold snort. He probably thought, like everyone else, that I was just playing games, waiting for him to coax me back. Ethan nudged Zach with his foot, telling him to shut up. Zach obediently went up to erase the board. I opened my textbook and started studying. Because of Ethan, I'd given up a chance to attend the prestigious Northwood High and came to Southwood. Instead, I could have been in the advanced placement classes here, but because of Ethan, I ended up in the lowest level class. I'd fought with my Mom about it, but she eventually gave in. Our families were close, so it didn't matter where I went to school. The plan was always for me to go to college with Ethan anyway. Perhaps it was because of our family's connection that I'd always seen Ethan as my prince. Charming. Now all I could think was, what a jerk. He acted like he was some kind of royalty. This time around I was going to stay far away from Ethan, starting with the next seating chart. Change. I was determined to get into the top 10 in the class on the next monthly exams. I never wanted to sit in front of Ethan again. Zach came back down after erasing the board. Seeing me studying, he snatched my book. Whoa, Miss Sanders. Hitting the books, getting ready to tutor our dear Ethan again. Maybe you can help me out too. In their eyes, everything I did was ultimately to get Ethan's attention. I grabbed my book back, my voice edged with annoyance. Hey, dumb brain is a dumb brain no matter how much tutoring it gets. Maybe you should just go study abroad or something. I turned with my book and with Ethan as size, he was angry of course. In his mind, Mia would never say anything bad about him. Did I do something to you? His tone was sharp, almost hostile. I ignored him, walked past him with my book, and returned to my seat, knowing Ethan, he wouldn't ask me twice. Sure enough, he kicked the chair next to him and stormed out of the classroom. I shook my head. He really thought he was a king, and it was my fault for having such terrible taste in. Guys, I went to the cafeteria for lunch. Alone. Before, I'd always trailed after Ethan, eagerly fetching his lunch and drinks. Today, I realized how easy it was to just get food for myself. No more getting glared at by the people waiting in line. So many times I've been yelled at because I was trying to get Ethan's favorite sweet and sour pork, and all I ever got in return was, I didn't ask you to get me lunch. Serves you right? Yes, serves me right. I carried my tray to my usual window seat. Soon I saw Ethan and Zach walking towards the cafeteria with their basketball. They habitually walked over to me, but today I hadn't gotten their lunch. Zach stared at the single tray in front of me, surprised. Mia, where's our food? I chewed my food, gesturing towards the serving counter. There might still be some left if you hurry. Ethan frowned at me. I bruised his ego, and he clearly wasn't happy. Yeah, are you on something? What did I ever do to you? I kept eating, my head down. Should I tell him that 10 years later, while he waited for his first love to give birth to a child that wasn't even his, our own unborn child, and I died in a fire? Should I tell him that I called him countless times that night, only to get a busy signal? Or that he eventually just hung up on me and texted that he was in a meeting in a hospital corridor? Ethan, did you really think I was that stupid? Did you really think I didn't know anything? In the end, Ethan didn't eat. He stormed out of the cafeteria fuming. He skipped afternoon classes too. That evening, I told my parents that I wasn't going to college with Ethan after graduation. My mom asked why. Looking at my parents' faces, I felt a sudden lump in my throat. I was their only child, and in my past life, I'd been so obsessed with a man who held no love for me in his heart or eyes that I neglected the two people who loved me most in the world. And in the end, I made them bury their own daughter. I sniffed and said, I want to spend more time with you guys. My dad always spoiled me. If I made up my mind about something, he would support me. After that, my parents found me a tutor. He was a year older than me from Northwood High. He'd gotten the highest score in the city on the entrance exam. His name was Ashton Hughes. Ashton came to my house every weekend to tutor me. He was incredibly smart. His explanations were often simpler than what the teachers taught in class. This weekend was the high school basketball league championship. Our school was hosting. Ashton was playing too. He was the captain of Northwood's team. He told me he'd compiled some notes for me and would bring them over on game day. Since the game was on a Friday, Ashton was coming to my house for our regular tutoring session after the game. But Ethan was playing too, so I wasn't planning on going to the game. I was waiting in the classroom for Ashton to text me. I sent him a message. Good luck, Mr. Hughes. Stay safe. I was just putting my phone away when Zach snatched it. Good luck, Mr. Hughes. Stay safe. Mia, have you moved on? Zach's loud voice attracted Ethan's attention. He looked over at me, a strange expression on his face. I thought I saw a flicker of nervousness, even fear in his eyes. Ethan, the always arrogant Ethan, showing such vulnerability. He walked towards me, took the phone from Zach, and stared at the messages, his face grim. Finally, he looked up at me, slowly, his voice laced with suspicion. Who is he? I snatched my phone back and shoved it into my pocket. What's it? To you. Zach gaped at me. It was hard to believe these words were coming from Mia. I turned to leave, heading for the library. As I turned, Ethan grabbed my arm. I asked you who he is. You're not going anywhere until you tell me. Was he crazy? In my past life, I chased after him, and he treated me like a nuisance, his disgust clear on his face. This time around, I was giving him what he wanted, distance, and he was suddenly clinging to me. How pathetic. I shook off his hand and frowned at him, my voice calm. Ethan, I thought you hated me, so please just keep hating me. Ethan grabbed my arm again. Just then, a clear male voice called out from the doorway. Mia. Ethan and I both looked up. Ashton stood there in his basketball uniform, holding his Northwood jacket and a notebook. He and Ethan were complete opposites. Ethan exuded youthful arrogance. Ashton had a gentle, warm presence, like a friendly older brother. I pulled away from Ethan and walked towards Ashton. How did you find me? Southwood's building layout was a maze. Even I got lost when I first started here. It was Ashton's first time here, and he'd found me. Finding you is a simple thing. Ashton handed me the notebook. It took me a long time to truly understand that sentence. Finding me was a simple thing for him. Ethan looked uneasy as he watched us talking, and laughing, he started to step towards me, but Zach stopped him. Ethan, the game's about to start. Let's go. Ethan shot Ashton a cold look, then kicked the classroom door as he walked out the back. I hadn't realized how immature he was. Ashton looked at Ethan's outburst with confusion, then smiled faintly. Is that Ethan? I nodded embarrassingly, scratching the back of my head. Have you ever felt ashamed of yourself for having like someone? That's how I felt. I could have dug a hole and buried myself. Good luck with the game. I'll be reading, waiting for you. You're not coming to watch. Ashton had probably heard about my relentless pursuit of Ethan. There's something unpleasant at the court. I hugged the notebook and shook my head. I used to be the most enthusiastic spectator at Ethan's games. Banners cheering. I'd given him everything I could, but he never took me to the post-game celebrations. Even his teammates would say, invite Mia. She put in so much effort, but Ethan would always reply, she's just being clingy. It'd be awkward. I overheard that conversation once. I cried for a long time that day. I should have known then that no matter how hard I tried, Ethan would never see me. He had room for everything in his eyes except for Mia. I was like Ethan's shadow, always trailing behind him, even getting stepped on. Sometimes I thought I was pretty pathetic, but then I'd remember that Ethan never actually rejected my affections. He was the one who kept giving me hope. Ashton seemed to understand. He just smiled as he left. He said, wait for me. We'll go home together after I win. I laughed. You're that confident you'll win? Ashton draped his jacket over his shoulder and, standing at the end of the hallway, smiled. Don't worry. This time, I won't let you down. I watched Ashton walk away, his broad shoulders relaxed, the Northwood jacket swinging casually from his grip. The quiet of the empty classroom settled around me, a stark contrast to the distant, muffled roar of the gymnasium down the hall. For the first time in my 2 lives, I didn't care about the score of an Ethan Hale Basketball game. I sat down at my desk, opening Ashton's notebook. The handwriting was neat, structured, and deliberate, so much like the boy himself. He had color-coded the formulas. I struggled with adding little margin. Notes. Don't overthink this step, Mia. You know this. I traced the ink with my fingertips. It was a small, simple kindness, but to a girl who had spent a decade begging for scraps of attention, it felt monumental. 2 hours later, the final buzzer echoed through the school, followed by a collective eruption of cheers that shook the floorboards. I packed my bag and walked out of the classroom. As I reached the main staircase, the double doors at the gym burst open. A tide of students flooded the hallway, chattering loudly. I can't believe Southwood lost. On her home court, a girl muttered as she passed me. That Northwood captain is a beast, though. Did you see that? Three-pointer in the last 10 seconds. I paused on the landing. Ashton had won. Before I could smile, the crowd parted. Ethan stormed down the hallway, his jersey soaked in sweat, his face dark as a thundercloud. Zach was trailing behind him, trying to offer placating words, but Ethan wasn't listening. His jaw was clenched, his eyes scanning the crowd. Until they locked onto me, he stopped, dead in his tracks. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. In my past life, this was the moment I would have rushed forward with a towel and a bottle of electrolyte water, whispering soft encouragements, taking the brunt of his bad mood just to be near him. Now I simply adjusted the strap of my backpack and held his gaze. Ethan took a step toward me, his chest heaving. Are you happy now? He snapped, his voice carrying over the lingering whispers of the students. You didn't show up. You actually sat out there with that Northwood guy's notebook instead of supporting your own school. My support doesn't dictate your ability to play basketball, Ethan, I said evenly. If you lost, it's because you were outplayed. Don't project your bruised ego onto me. Zach gasped audibly. Several students nearby exchanged wide-eyed glances. Mia Sanders, the girl who worshipped the ground Ethan walked on, had just told him he was outplayed. Ethan's face flushed a deep, angry red. He opened his mouth to shout, but a calm voice cut through the tension. Ready to go, Mia? Ashton stepped out from the stairwell. He had changed into his street clothes, his dark hair still damp from the locker room showers. He looked completely unbothered by the heavy atmosphere, his eyes locking onto mine with that familiar, steady warmth. Ethan pivoted, glaring at Ashton. Back off. She's not going anywhere with you. Ashton didn't flinch. He didn't even look at Ethan. He kept his eyes on me. I promised I'd walk you home. I'm ready, I said, stepping past Ethan. Without a second glance, as I walked toward Ashton, Ethan grabbed my wrist. His grip was tight, his fingers digging into my skin. The sudden physical contact sent a jolt of panic, an echo of the searing heat, the smoke, the feeling of being trapped. I'm in a meeting. Mia, stop calling. The memory of his voice from the night I died flashed in my mind. Let go of me, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. You're acting crazy, Mia. Ethan hissed. What is this? Are you trying to make me jealous? Because it's pathetic. Before I could rip my arm away, Ashton's hand clamped down on Ethan's wrist. She said, let go, Ashton said. His tone wasn't raised, but it carried a quiet, undeniable authority. The easygoing older brother persona was gone. His eyes were cold, calculating, and fixed on Ethan. For a second, Ethan looked like he wanted to swing, but Ashton was taller, broader, and hadn't just played for grueling quarters of basketball. Ethan sneered, violently yanking his hand back. Whatever, Ethan spat, looking at me with pure disdain. If you want to hang out with the enemy, go ahead. Don't come crying to me tomorrow. I'd rather die, I said softly. The words were so casual, but they carried the weight of a burned corpse. Ethan recoiled slightly, as if struck. I didn't wait to see his reaction. I turned and walked out the doors into the cool evening air, Ashton falling into step beside me. The next month was a blur of textbooks, late night study, sessions, and the quiet, steady presence of Ashton Hughes. I kept my promise to myself. I moved my desk to the very back corner of the classroom, as far away from Ethan as physically possible. I stopped buying his lunch. I stopped doing his homework. When he spoke to me, I gave him monosyllabic answers. At first, Ethan treated it like a stubborn game. He would purposely drop his pen near my desk, waiting for me to pick it up. I'd step over it. He would complain loudly about being thirsty. I'd put my earphones. Zach tried to intervene once, cornering me by the lockers. Mia, come on. Ethan's miserable. He won't admit it, but he misses having you around. Just apologize and things can go back to normal. I have nothing to apologize for, Zach, I replied, shutting my walker. And normal was me being his servant. I'm done. By the time the monthly exams rolled around, the entire dynamic of the junior class had shifted. The girls who used to mock me for being a doormat were now whispering about my sudden glow-up. Without the stress of managing Ethan's life, I was sleeping better. My skin cleared. I stopped hunching my shoulders when the exam rankings were posted on the bulletin board. A crowd gathered. I pushed through to the front, my heart hammering. I scanned the top 10. 1. Sarah Jenkins. 2. Michael Chin. 8. Mia Sanders. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I did it. I was in the top 10. Whoa, a voice muttered behind me. I turned to see Ethan staring at the board. His eyes flicked from my name down to his own. 42, Ethan Hale. Without me feeding him my study guides and completing his assignments, his grades had tanked. He looked at me, a mixture of betrayal and anger in his eyes. You did this on purpose, he muttered, so only I could hear. You left me to drown. You have 2 hands and a brain, Ethan, I whispered back. Learn to swim. The next day was seating reassignment in Southwood High. Seats were chosen based on exam rank. As the 8th student called, I walked to the front of the room and picked a seat in the first row, right by the window. When it was Ethan's turn, 34 people later, the only seats left were in the back corner. The physical distance between us was finally a reflection of the reality. He was out of my orbit. Spring arrived, bringing with it a ghost from my past. Her name was Chloe. In my previous life, Chloe was the girl Ethan had loved from afar. She had transferred to a different school in middle school, but they had reconnected in college. She was the woman he was waiting for outside the delivery room while I burned to death when she walked into our classroom as a mid-semester transfer student. My blood ran cold. She was just, as I remembered, delicate, pretty, and a fragile Servway with a soft voice that made boys want to protect her. The teacher assigned her a seat near the middle of the room. During lunch, I watched from the corner of my eye as Ethan practically tripped over himself to talk to her. He was suddenly charming, attentive, and painfully eager. It was exactly how he used to act around her in the past. I waited for the jealousy to hit. I waited for the familiar, agonizing ache in my chest that used to suffocate me whenever he looked at another woman. It never came. Instead, I felt a profound, overwhelming wave of relief. She's his problem now, I thought. I packed up my lunch and headed to the library where Ashton was waiting. He had gotten permission to use Southwood's library for a joint school research project, which was just an excuse to study with me during his free periods. When I sat down across from him, he looked up from his laptop. You look lighter. I am, I smiled, pulling out my history notes. A ghost just walked into my classroom, and I realized I'm not afraid of it anymore. Ashton didn't ask for details. He just reached across the table and lightly tapped my pen with his. Good. Ghosts belong in the past. We have a future to study for. But the ghost didn't stay in the past. Chloe, it turned out, was used to being the center of attention, and while she enjoyed Ethan's fawning, she quickly noticed that Ethan was easily distracted. His eyes kept darting to the Front row to me because I had stopped caring. Ethan couldn't handle it. The boy who had everything handed to him was obsessing over the one thing that had slipped through his fingers. One afternoon, it rained heavily. I was standing under the school awning, realizing I had forgotten my umbrella. I was just about to make a run for the bus stop when Ethan stepped up beside me. I can give you a ride, he said. He wasn't looking at me, trying to maintain his casual, arrogant facade. My mom brought the car. No, thanks. I'll take the bus. Mia, don't be stupid. It's pouring. He finally looked at me, and I saw a flicker of desperation beneath the pride. Why? Are you doing this? I know I wasn't perfect, but we're us. We've always been us. You can't just throw away 10 years of history. I didn't throw it away. Ethan, you burned it. He frowned, confused by my phrasing. What? You never liked me, I said, my voice barely audible over the rain. You liked how much I liked you. You liked the convenience. You liked having a safety net, but now you have Chloe. Go be with her. Chloe is just a friend, he snapped, stepping closer. You're the one acting out. You're the one hanging around that Northwood snob just to get a reaction out of me. I actually laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound. You really think the universe revolves around you, don't you? Before Ethan could respond, a black umbrella opened over my head, shielding me from the mist. I looked up to see Ashton. He was wearing his Northwood uniform, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Sorry I'm late, Ashton said, his voice a warm contrast to the freezing rain. Traffic was brutal. You're right on time, I said. Ethan stared at us, his fists clenched at his sides. You don't even go to this school. Hughes, why are you always hovering around her? Ashton looked at Ethan with a mixture of pity and indifference. Because she's worth showing up for. Have a good night, Ethan. Ashton placed a hand on the small of my back, guiding me out into the rain under the shelter of his umbrella. I didn't look back. If I had, I would have seen Ethan standing alone in the damp cold, finally realizing that the doormat he had walked all over had built a door, walked through it, and locked it behind her. 2 years later, senior year went by in a flash of college applications, advanced placement exams, and weekend dates with Ashton. True to my word, I never slipped back into my old habits. Ethan and I became strangers who simply occupied the same building. I watched from afar as his relationship with Chloe played out exactly as I knew it would. Toxic, demanding, and exhausting. Chloe constantly needed validation, and Ethan, who was used to receiving rather than giving, quickly grew resentful. His grades slipped further. His basketball career fizzled out after a knee injury. He didn't rehab properly. Meanwhile, I had thrived. The day the college acceptance letters arrived, my hands were shaking. I sat at my kitchen table, my parents hovering nervously behind me. I clicked the email from the state's top university, the same university Ashton was currently attending as a freshman. Dear Mia Sanders, we are thrilled to offer you admission. My dad yelled. My mom burst into tears, wrapping her arms around my neck. I sat back in the chair, a profound sense of peace washing over me. I had rewritten my destiny. That evening, I went to the local park to meet Ashton. He had driven back from campus just to be with me. When I opened the letter, when he saw my face, he dropped his keys and picked me up, spinning me around under the streetlights. I told you, he laughed, setting me down and pressing his forehead against mine. I told you you'd do it. I did it, I whispered, wrapping my arms around his waist, burying my face in his jacket. It smelled like cedar and clean laundry. It smelled like safety. The high school graduation ceremony was held on a sweltering day in June. I gave the salutatorian address. As I stood at the podium, looking out over the sea of blue caps and gowns, my eyes briefly locked with Ethan's in the crowd. He looked tired. The arrogance of our sophomore year had been hollowed out, replaced by a sullen bitterness. He was headed to a community college he didn't want to attend, tied to a girlfriend he resented, mourning a future he had sabotaged. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt nothing. After the ceremony, my parents threw a massive barbecue in our backyard. Ashton was by my side the entire time, seamlessly weaving through conversations with my relatives, holding my hand under the table as the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. I stepped out to the front porch to get some quiet air. A figure was standing at the end of the driveway. It was Ethan. He wasn't wearing his graduation gown. He was in a wrinkled t-shirt, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He looked up when a screen door clicked shut behind me. We stood there for a long moment, the distance of the driveway stretching between us like a canyon. Congratulations, he said. His voice was hoarse. Thank you. He took a step forward, hesitating at the edge of the lawn. Mia, I wanted to ask you something. I crossed my arms. Okay. Did you ever really love me? The question was desperate, torn from a place of deep, unresolved pain. Back then in middle school, freshman year. Because sometimes I look back and it feels like a dream, like I imagined it. You just turned it off so fast. I looked at him, truly looking at the boy who had been my husband in another life. The boy who had let me burn. I did love you. Ethan, I said softly. I loved you with everything I had, but you didn't want my love. You just wanted my worship. And when I stopped worshiping you, you realized how empty your own hands were. He swallowed hard, looking down at his shoes. If I had treated you better back then, would things be different? No, I said, and it was the truest thing I had ever spoken. Some things are meant to end, Ethan, so that better things can begin. He nodded slowly. A single tear tracked down his cheek, but he didn't bother wiping it away. He turned and walked down the street, disappearing into the fading light. That was the last time I ever spoke to Ethan Hale. 10 years later, the date on the calendar glowed ominously on my phone screen, October 14th. It was the exact date I had died. In my previous life, I woke up feeling a phantom tightness in my chest, a residual panic that I couldn't quite shake. The smell of smoke seemed to linger at the edges of my senses. But then a heavy arm draped over my waist, pulling me flush against a warm, solid chest. Morning, Mrs. Hughes, Ashton murmured, his voice thick with sleep. He pressed a kiss to the back of my neck. I let out a long breath, the phantom smoke vanishing, replaced by the scent of him. Morning. You're tense, he noticed instantly, shifting so he could look at my face. His thumb gently stroked my cheek. What's wrong? Is it the presentation? Today? I was now a senior architect at a major firm, and Ashton was a lead software engineer. We had been married for 3 years, living in a beautiful, light-filled house in the suburbs. There were no secrets, no neglect, no waiting. By the phone, no, I smiled, turning to press my face into his chest. I just had a bad dream, a really old one. Well, you're awake now, he whispered, holding me tighter. And you're safe. I've got you. Later that afternoon, after my presentation, which went flawlessly, I walked out of the office building and headed toward the cafe across the street to meet Ashton for lunch. As I waited at the crosswalk, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a group chat with some old high school acquaintances. I rarely checked it, but a photo caught my eye. It was a screenshot of a local news article. Local man arrested after altercation at hospital. I squinted at the thumbnail, the man being escorted away by police, looking haggard, furious, and utterly defeated, was Ethan. The article detailed a domestic dispute. He had been caught in a screaming match with his ex-wife, Chloe, outside a delivery room, disputing the paternity of her child. I stared at the screen. The universe had a terrifying, ironic way of balancing its scales, even without me there to be his collateral damage. Ethan had walked right into the flames of his own making. Mia? I looked up. Ashton was standing on the opposite corner, holding 2 cups of coffee, wearing that same warm, steady smile he had given me in a high school hallway all those years ago. The pedestrian light turned green. I locked my phone, slipped it into my purse, and stepped Off the curb. I didn't look back at the screen. I didn't look back at the past. I walked forward into the sunlight, toward the man who had taught me that love wasn't supposed to burn you to ashes. Love was supposed to help you bloom.